student life experience. Make CF your first choice. Call 352-873-5800.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Kind of coincidental. We just had a commercial for one of the colleges, the local colleges, and we have a guest right now, John McGee. He's got a book called Dear Parents. It's a field guide for college preparation. John is the vice president for planning and public affairs at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University in Minnesota. And let's see, he will have children in college continuously until 2028.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
He's dedicated.
So he knows this stuff. The book Dear Parents will help you as a parent figure out a way to not only get your child in college, but keep your child in college. John McGee, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, my gosh. When my son was first, like in 11th grade in high school, whatever, when we started looking at colleges, do you know what the biggest thing that got to me? Acronyms. Everything is abbreviated, right?
It is. I wrote about that. I called it alphabets and acronyms, and I think the education profession generally never met an acronym it couldn't fully embrace. So we've got sort of coded language for everything, which mostly means you need to ask what they mean.
And that's it. You have to ask what they mean, because the people in your field use those acronyms as if it's commonly understood. And a guy like me is like, wait a minute, you have to back up. Because sometimes I don't know if it's a word or an acronym.
Well, and it's interesting, I both work for two colleges, and I have children going through this process, and it's been a really interesting way to learn and to hear these acronyms used, not in the context I would in my work, but to have to think about them as a parent, and I have to ask sometimes the same questions that you do.
I know my brother and his wife, when Aaron was born 20 years ago, they started the Florida Prepaid College Program, and that turned out to be a blessing also.
Those are great things. Those are great things. I'm often asked, when should families start thinking about college? And you don't think about an institution when your child is born, but I actually think, and not kiddingly, since I've spent a lot of time in birthing centers, that a birthing center is actually a pretty good place to start thinking about it. And plans, whether they're prepaid tuition plans or 529 plans, or frankly just any kind of saving when kids are really young, and parents can do it, or grandparents, or aunts and uncles, when kids are young, to take advantage of time and the compounding effect of interest over time is really important and valuable. You don't need to be thinking about an institution then, but saving then can pay big dividends later, because as you know, and I have come to know, boy, those 18 years go by quickly.
They do. Very much so.
If you all throughout your child's life, you and your wife and your child, they're all kind of always. This comes up now and then. The closer they get to graduating high school, the more likely you're speaking about this a lot. But let's say you've been grooming your child to I don't know, become a doctor. Let's just do something obvious or common, and then they are being courted or seduced by another college, because maybe they've got athletic skills or they've got something else that other college would like them to be there. They're going to benefit by having that student in their student body. But what do you do? I mean, you've already set your heart on Yale, let's say, or whatever. I don't know. Lee, help me out here. I don't know which colleges are there. So what is your advice to that? If a school is courting your son, let's say, to play football at the University of Florida, but meanwhile you had other ideas, other schools in mind, what do you do?
Well, first of all, I think it's always good to have more than one school in mind rather than just one. And in fact, most kids do now. The typical student is applying to 5 or more colleges now. I think too many kids and parents start with, am I going to fit a school? And so when you get to the point where, gosh, I want to go to this place or this kind of place, but this other school is suggesting I do this, I think if you approach that without having thought about who you are, you've made a mistake. So what I asked my kids to do, and I recommend to parents to ask their kids to do, and by the way, I'm not sure my kids actually did it, but that's a different thing. But I said complete 4 sentences, really short, simple sentences. I am, I expect, I value, I need. If you can fill those out, use emojis if you want to figure that out. But know who you are and what drives you before you start really looking into colleges, because the question isn't, gee, do I fit this college? The question is, does the college fit me? And it may well be, I am a great football player and a great student, and I want to have an experience that fulfills both. Great. There are colleges, if those are both really important to you, you can find places where you can do both. And I think that the key is to have thought about it in advance. And somebody told me once, you can't ask a 17 or 18-year-old to do that. To which I said, oh, yes, you can. These people are very often very in touch with themselves. Just because they don't share it with their parents doesn't mean they're not thinking about it.
And we have a really wonderful public school system in our area, and by the time a student is a sophomore, they're presenting, they're getting them geared for whatever they want to do, whether it's vocational or at a vocational college or at an academic college, and they give them the tools, and they will tell them suggestions like you'll need to volunteer at things. That way you've got volunteer hours to put toward a scholarship, because a lot of students can't afford to pay out of pocket, so scholarships is a great way to go for the student, and they need to know what the criteria is.
Absolutely, and this is where school counselors play a really big role. They're important. They're important to students. They can be important to parents, and I always encourage students to talk, and in some cases urge students and parents to talk with school counselors, because they this is what they do professionally, and they're very good at helping kids, ferret those questions out.
When money is an issue, one of the solutions seems to be that the states seem to give a real big break, financial break, to those students who live in the state. We recently had a decision in this state, because of the influx of people who came here from Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, to extend that to those students who are here. So is that part of it too? When money is an important part of the conversation, I'm guessing an in-state school is usually one of the best choices.
Well, very often, right. I think that, however, the answer to that is yes, but certainly in-state, if you go to a public institution where taxpayers are offsetting part of the price of tuition, that can make, and in-state tuition is less than out-of-state tuition at public institutions in most places. Also, most states have financial aid programs available to students who attend public or private colleges for in-state residents, which are also very often wonderful. I'm very fortunate to live in a state that has an extraordinary state financial aid program. The other piece, though, is that when in doubt, if in doubt, always apply for financial aid, no matter where you go. I mean, I think that money is very often an issue, and an issue for most families. And so you have everything to gain and nothing to lose, no matter where you choose to go, by applying for student financial aid.
Sometimes a student will have in mind a particular college or university that they want to attend, and that's the only place that they apply. What happens? How do you counsel the student who has been rejected and to move forward and go somewhere else?
Well, you actually asked two questions there. Only about 9 or 10% of all students apply to just one institution. It was much higher than that a generation ago. I always counsel students to apply to more than one, even if there's one they really want to go to, if for no other reason than to have something to compare. On the question of rejection, boy, I really, My sense on that is that our job as parents is to help them if they get a no to move on. An admission decision, a plus, a yes or a no, is not a referendum on all that our kids can be, nor is it a referendum on our parenting. There are thousands of colleges in the United States, and there are many, many choices that any student could have. And our job is to take them to learn about it, learn from it, and move beyond it. And because, in fact, no happens in our lives in many, many ways. And for certainly anybody who, by the age of 18, certainly has heard the word no more than once and been disappointed by it. But we move on.
I still hear the word no. I
still offer it frequently to my children.
So what do you do when let's say your child has his or her heart set on a school because they have a reputation for having a great veterinary program? I'll just pick one at random. Okay. And then you go to Consumer Reports or one of those, and it's listed as like 45th. it's down there a bit. How do you know if that report is should be taken with a grain of salt? How do you know?
Well, that's a great question, and the answer is you don't. I think that each of those guidebook rankings use criteria. You should read the criterion they use and decide how much you value them. In some cases, it's reputational. In some cases, it's related to wealth. In some institutional wealth. In some cases, it's related to any other number of factors. I think I've never asked my own kids to look at rankings ever. I think that they don't tell you about the college's value, the college's values, or even the college experience. And so in the case of a program as specific as something like what you said, veterinary medicine, you could look and say, well, gee, how many vet med students did they have? Did they actually earn their degrees? I mean, there are questions you can ask the school where you can find this out. But to say something on a ranking of 400 or 500 or as many as 900 institutions, that this institution came out as number 78 or 137 or 248. I'm not sure. As a parent, I've never actually found that helpful at all.
How do you guide your child to handle different social issues?
Well, and those are forefront in parents' minds, things like binge drinking, sexual consent, especially those two, drug and alcohol use and sexual consent. Much of college success comes from students making good choices, and it's scary for parents because when we send them off to college, they're really not under our watchful eye, and we have to hope that we have prepared them to make good choices as they go. Parents should know that colleges, really all colleges now, have well-developed counseling and health advocate programs on campus that are there to help students who need help. But I think that students who go to college with a strong sense of self-respect, who respect others and don't follow the crowd for the sake of following the crowd, are really best positioned to make and own the choices that they'll face as young adults. These are adult choices. They're complex choices, and I think they often seem less scary to our daughters and sons because they happen in real time than they do to us as parents, because we really want them to make the right choice and we're not there to make it for them. But they have to make those choices, and they have to own those choices, including the consequences.
What about the sorority fraternity part of college? Is there any advice in the book regarding that?
There isn't. Would be a good topic for another book. It's actually not something I'm familiar with because we don't have a Greek system at the schools I work at, and my own children aren't at schools where there's a Greek system. So I'm really in no position to comment on them, but that's a really interesting question, and now I'm going to go back and look into that.
I don't know if it's the movies or the books, but it always makes it seem like that's trouble waiting to happen. I don't know why.
I think that movies sensationalize everything, right?
Yeah.
And this is and the movie Animal House still pings around in people's minds, and I'm certain that it's not like that. That reality isn't like that. But again, I really that's something I'm just not familiar with.
Do you advocate that students have jobs while they're attending college?
I think it's a great thing for a student to have a job for a variety of reasons. Most of our students at my institutions do, and we've set it up. In fact, we don't call it work-study. We call it student employment, which I think there's a difference between. One seems like financial aid, the other seems like a job from which you can not only earn money, which is important, but also a job from which you can learn. In my own office, every year I have 2 or 3 student employees who are doing research, learning a skill that's valuable to them for after they graduate, and also positioning themselves to get a letter of recommendation. So I think working in college is, first of all, the reality is most students have to just for the money, but it's also just it can be a very good kind of professional development experience. Now, having said that, I think students should pay attention to how many hours a week they work. I think it's really hard to work 30, 40 hours a week and be a full-time student. But for students who are working 10 or 15 hours a week, especially, these can become really important experiences beyond the paycheck.
There were a couple of corporations recently that offered free college. I think Disney might be one of them. I think Walmart is one of them. But there is an exchange. They pay for your school, but you have to agree to work for them for, I think, at least 2 years. What are your thoughts on that deal that they're offering some of their employees?
Well, it sends a signal about how much they value college, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And for students for whom that seems like the right thing to do, that those can be extraordinary experiences. I mean, a corporation like Disney is there are people everywhere who would love to work for a large corporation like that, a Fortune 500, Fortune 100 corporation like that. In some ways, that's not so different than ROTC. Many campuses have reserve officer training corps on their campuses, and there's a point there too where you are having, for students who go 4 years in ROTC, where the military is paying for their college, then they make a commitment post-college to the military. I think students should think carefully about those offers, but they can be extraordinary for them, and if the fit is right, I think it's that a student should take those offers very, very seriously.
What kind of advice do you give to the parent that their child is in college now, and now they're kind of lost, they don't have a child at home, and then the parent decides to go back to school and go to that same college? Do you advocate for that?
Wow. I think students need to have the space to own their own experience. And in the book, in my book, Dear Parents, which is hubbed around letters that I asked other people to write, our dean of students here at the College of St. Benedict wrote a letter, and a parent of a student asked her once if she could come and live with her daughter for the first 2 weeks of the semester just to make sure she was getting settled in and making friends. That's pretty extreme, and I wouldn't recommend that. I think students should have this is an adult experience. It's a transition from really childhood to adulthood, and I think students should have those experiences on their own. If parents want to go back to school and get their own education, great. I think that's terrific to get more education, but to sort of make it where you're going to be your son or daughter's kind of college buddy, I suspect that most students would find that really uncomfortable. I think my kids would just look at me and say, "Not a chance, Dad."
Yeah, right. I know, I never do that to mine.
The book is called Dear Parents, A Field Guide for College Preparation. John McGee wrote the book, and earlier on in the interview, he gave us an assignment to finish these sentences, so here's my answers. I am hungry. I expect lunch. I value the Happy Meal, and I need $5. So there's my answer.
There you have it. It's complete.
So how do we get the book?
It's available on Amazon.com. It's also available from major booksellers everywhere.
Okay, excellent. And is it in the library?
I'm hopeful it's in the library. It's in our library.
going to be in ours, too, because our librarian is in the studio right now, and I just handed it to him. So it's going into our library.
Wonderful. I'm happy to hear that. Thank you so much.
John, thank you for being on the air with us. I remember, right now it's fun to look back at. You still have children in school, in college, so, you're still going through it. But I remember those years real vividly, and I was absolutely thankful that the folks at the school were patient with me, because I felt like I was asking the same questions more than once.
Which is okay.
Yeah, I don't think I got it all the time, especially, like I said, with the acronyms. John McGee, thank you for being on the air with us. That was fun.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. We'll be right back.
Great.
There's a lot to love about Freddy's frozen custard and steak burgers.
I love the really little thin crispy fries.
Love Freddy's for the patty melts and the turtle sundaes.
It's gotta be the custards.
The California steak burger is my favorite.
It reminds me what burgers used to taste like when I was a kid.
I love Freddy's.
Stop in for Freddy's famous steak burgers, cooked to order and topped your favorite way, all on a butter toasted bun. Freddy's frozen custard and steak burgers, the taste that brings you back.
Welcome back to autumn. The weather is cooling off and the leaves will turn colors. At Palm Garden of Ocala, autumn is celebrated with special activities and cold weather menus, even pumpkin spice. But they do not celebrate fall. At Palm Garden, fall can represent pain and injury. If you have fallen and need short-term rehab, Palm Garden is your best choice. During autumn, the only thing that should fall are leaves. Palm Garden is located on the corner of Southwest 27th Avenue and 34th Street.
Hi, this is JP from Penn Flooring here in Ocala. I would like to invite you to come in and visit our spacious showroom where we have solutions for every style and budget. From wall-to-wall carpet to hardwood floors and tiles, we have an unsurpassed selection of flooring. At Penn Flooring, we've provided quality customer service with a family touch for over 25 years. Visit our website at pennflooring.com or come by our showroom, 1201 Southwest